Hey everybody. I don't know if anyone is listening here. I'm just talking to myself. Okay. So it's 3 o'clock. I think we'll give this maybe 3 or 4 more minutes just so that people can join and realize just how pretty my slides are. I think I'll try and turn on this Q&A functionality on the Hangout so that I can see if people are asking questions and then, ask questions all the time. Haven't you done one of these before? Are you underway? Is Jody asking? Yeah, no, I haven't done one of these. One thing in particular I'm not too clear on is how confidential these Hangouts are. So I'm not going to show anything super sensitive, maybe some things that aren't entirely public. But I will try not to show too much. That's kind of OCCRP internal. And I think that should probably also be true for your questions, kind of keep it generic, because I think this will end up as a hidden YouTube video, but still it'll end up on YouTube. All right. Maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. Can I get a sign if people can hear me all right? Okay, Smari says he hears me fine. That's good. Okay. I can't really tell how many people are on this call right now, so it's a bit hard to tell when we should get started. I don't know if other people can speak as well. I get the suspicion that you can't. 6 viewers right now. Okay, I think there were 10 people who signed up on the Google sign. So maybe we'll wait for another minute or two. Hi, Drew. Hi, Ellie. Looks like everybody in Sarajevo's on. Okay. So I'm turning up my mic a little bit. Please don't be scared. Moldova's there. Hey, Moldova, how are you guys doing? All right, it's 3:05. I'm German. I apologize for that. So let's get started on time, etc. So yeah, I wanted to talk about the data search engine a bit, and I'm quite excited that we've got this Hangout going now. The discussion will basically be about the search tool that we've been working on for the past couple of months, basically since January, on and off. And I think I want to start off by looking a bit at why we're doing this, what the purpose of this tool is, how it's supposed to kind of support investigative work at the OCCRP. Look also at other stuff that we're doing very, very briefly. And then look at how exactly to use this tool, just walk you through some of the main functions. And finally, in the end, I want to kind of talk a bit about how we can work together and get data in there that might be relevant to your specific interests or investigations. Just to start an intro, why we're doing this, basically, I think the first point has to be that we want to kind of be able to support ongoing active investigations. So let's say that someone brings you that famous USB stick or hard drive or whatever it is that has some interesting material on it, and you need to get a quick overview of what is in there, what's interesting, who are the people that are getting mentioned, who are the companies that get referenced in this data set. Then how do you do that, right? One thing is you can kind of just read through all the documents manually, but I mean, as many of these leagues are now so big that that's not really a feasible path. So the idea is to kind of make this thing where you can send it to the tech team. We can very quickly kind of get the data into a form where it's searchable. The second goal, I think, is kind of more long-term. It's about basically building a bit of a history, right? And a bit of a memory. I mean, OCCRP has amazing amounts of information, amazing amounts of resources, but these are very localized, right? They sit on people's computers, they sit on specific laptops, they sit on the tech team's servers, if they're big databases of companies, etc. And so it's really hard for anyone to get an overview of, do we actually know anything about this person? Do we actually know anything about this company? Even just saying, have we actually investigated them previously isn't trivial. So the idea is also to kind of make our collective source material more searchable, more accessible, more generally kind of visible to people who want to do an investigation. And then also to kind of provide more ongoing services. So for example, to be able to subscribe to an alert whenever a businessman or a politician from your country is being mentioned, you want to be informed when they pop up in a database, whether it's in the BVI or whether it's in Tajikistan or whether it's somewhere else in the world. You want to be the first to know. And that's kind of, as we add more data, alerts are being sent out all the time. And so you can kind of get a live picture of what's happening there. Then there's kind of this question about how can we be more systematic about this, right? Can we make lists of all the people that we're interested in, people we've reported on previously, people who are subject to international sanctions, people who are in any other way of interest, and then can we take those lists and systematically cross-reference them with the corpus of documents we have? And that's something that's still we're still experimenting with how best to do that, but I think it'll be one of the most productive parts of this project. I also want to say one thing that I think the data search, which by the way I might refer to as Aleph, which is kind of its code name, which Aleph is not intended to do, and that's basically solve all of OCCRP's data problems, right? Investigative data usage is incredibly complex. There's many different things you can do, and we can't solve all of those with one particular tool. To make that point, I just wanted to show you another thing that we've also got, which is called the Data Vault. So the Data Vault is basically a massive database that has all the major structured databases that we have in it. So we've got from kind of company registries for Great Britain, for parts of the US, for I think Romania and other countries like that. We've got data like that. We've also got stuff like overseas-owned properties in the UK, which is quite fun. We've got very random and interesting data sets. And so the Data Vault is not something that's kind of intended as an end-user facing kind of product, as something where you just go in. Unfortunately, it's kind of a more nerdy way of storing the data. And so what I want to say there is just that basically we should have conversations about how can we kind of use that data, turn it into reports that provide you with interesting leads. Here on the screen, I've got a thing that I sent to Ellie last night, which is basically kind of looking at what happens if you take all the properties in the UK that are owned by overseas companies and cross-reference that with sanctions lists. So lists of, for example, the Swiss, the Europeans, the Brits, and the US saying, hey, we really don't like these people. So I kind of actually find some results, and some of these might be interesting. There's also the possibility of accessing this yourself, but then you need to learn something about a query tool called SQL. I think this is often being discussed on investigative journalism conferences, but it's not that widespread yet. Anyway, so that's just a quick excursion into like other things that are also happening around data. Going more specifically into data.OCCRP or Aleph, it does basically 5 big things. One is it basically makes Word documents, PDF files, spreadsheets, databases, email archives, all that kind of stuff that you kind of come across when you have source data in a journalistic context. It makes all of that searchable. We've got a lot of scrapers that are kind of going through different websites, whether it's company archives or even other websites. And we're trying to pull all of that stuff in and make it searchable in a coherent way. One kind of specific subproblem there that's quite hard is kind of recognizing text and images, right? So you might have scanned documents. I think Yanukovych leaks was a big case of that, where you have scanned documents and you want to kind of reconstruct what is it actually saying in those documents. And so that's part of what LF does, is making text and images recognizable. Then basically another aspect that I think is quite important for our work is it controls who can see what documents, right? So I think one misconception that I've come across within people who've used the tool already is that, okay, if anything that's in there, it's visible to the whole world. That's not true. You can very kind of granularly control who gets to see what, and you can kind of keep confidential data in there and make sure that only those that are actively part of your project or of your team get access to it. Then it also keeps a list of alerts, and I mentioned this before. Basically, they're saved searches. And finally, again, kind of checking against the list of people we're interested in. So yeah, let's dig into this. And before we kind of go into searching, I want to bring up a metaphor that really kind of is helpful for me, even though it's a bit weird. And that's kind of slicing the cheese, right? So you can imagine that kind of ELEF is this massive repository of data that has different facets, that have different aspects. And so the question is kind of how do you define what you want to have in, what part of the block of cheese you want to take with you, and what part of you want to cut out and remove from what you're seeing when you type in a search. And so it's really important to think about both of these aspects. First of all, what do you want to take in? So for example, you type in a search word. And the second of all, what do you want to remove systematically? I don't want to see anything that comes from this and this source of documents. I don't want to see anything that mentions this name. All these things, right? So for me, it's always been helpful to think about this as kind of a massive block of stuff, whether it's silly putty or cheese or whatever, that you're cutting slices off, and then you're looking at either the big piece or the small piece and trying to understand what's going on in there. Might be a bit weird, but hey. So let's jump in. If you go to data.occrp.org, this is roughly what you'd see. You would have a simple search page. As you scroll down, you can see some of the document sources that we have we've already incorporated into the tool. I've tried to group them into some categories that make some sort of sense. And so you have this category here, gray literature, is basically anything that didn't fit into any of the other categories, just in case you were worried about this. But you get like a little overview of what's in there. So the way that typically I think most people start using this is just you type in a name that you might be interested in. So for example, I read this morning about this oil company, Tullow, and you just hit enter, and there you go, you get a few search results. Now you're on the search result view, and there's just a few things I want to point out, right? You've got these two big sections. This section here, if people can see my mouse, I hope that's the case. This section here basically has the results, whereas this section over here has other ways to control the result set and kind of make more detailed choices about what you want to see. For all of these results, basically, if you click on them, you will see the document that's underlying the search that I had. You will also here see a few other controls. You will see kind of some metadata of where the document came from. What's particularly useful just in terms of validating the veracity or the correctness of the document is that you can always click on the source URL and then you're taken back to the page that we incorporated. I mean, that's true, unfortunately, only for stuff that we took off the web, not for leaked source materials, obviously. Finally, up here, you can kind of switch between pages, and you can also show a pure text version of the document. And always, you can kind of download the original version, and you can download a PDF version of whatever document we're talking about. One aspect I want to highlight quickly is, for example, here we've got a result that, as it says here, comes from the WikiLeaks State Department cables. And you can see that there's 3 snippets being presented to you here. So you've got one snippet up here, one snippet here, one snippet here. And these are from different pages. So if you click on this link here, instead of being taken to the beginning of the document, you're actually taken to page 3, which is where Tullow Oil is mentioned somewhere in this paragraph, right? So this is quite useful in terms of large documents. I mean, often you have these documents where someone has just scanned in a binder full of documents. You've got 500 pages at once, and so how can you actually see stuff? on page 420 without kind of clicking your hands into pain. So another thing that I want to show very quickly is that at any moment, if kind of you feel like you've really lost track of where your search is, you can just clear all your search. And then what you're seeing is you're seeing all the documents. Right now, these documents that are shown here are in no particular order whatsoever. And we must type in a new query to get back to an interesting place. Now let me try and make this even a bit bigger, because I want to just point out that this supports advanced search operators. So I think many of you over the past month in the Panama Papers have been working on Blacklight, and most of the operations that you might be used to from Blacklight, this also supports, I think, even a few more. So you might be Vladimir Putin, might be interested in the president of Russia. You can then quote it, and quoting it, putting it in those little quotes, just means I want to find that exact piece of text, right? You can also do the kind of distance search that I've seen mentioned surprisingly much in the context of the Panama Papers. So you can say Bank America and with a distance of 2. So now you get the Bank of America, the America Bank, Bank for America, Bank in America, all these kind of near but not exactly next to each other matches of stuff. So we've actually got some companies called Bank of America registered on the Isle of Man, which makes sense probably in the context of globalization. The other thing you can obviously always do is you can use a bit of spell checking. I would use that with care because it's very easy to get much too broad results out of that. But if you're interested, for example, in the dude called Vladimir, but you're not really sure that's how it's spelled, then you can, let's say, correct for one spelling mistake. And I expect that we'll find a lot of Vladimirs with a V instead of a W. Or you could use that for any number of spelling mistakes. So this, I don't know, you'd get more fuzzy results, right? And you can also see it's a bit slower because the search engine needs to do a lot more carrying in that. Another thing that I wanted to point out is just the ability to force or disable specific terms, right? So for example, let's say I'm looking for all the documents that contain the term Aliyev, but I'm really not interested in Ilham today. So what I've done is I've put a plus before Aliyev, I've put a minus in front of Ilham, and I should now get all the other Aliyevs in the world. So this is quite useful. I especially find it useful to remove terms that are not part of a name or something, but an indicator for the type of document you don't want. So let's say you're looking for a specific person, and you get all these Gazette notices, right? What you might want to do then is you might want to kind of say notice or some other word that occurs in all the Gazette notices, and that would kind of help you to kind of rinse out a few of these parts of the search that you're less interested in. By the way, I think this Q&A thing is running at the same time here. So if any of you have a question to clarify or feel like I'm going too fast, then please let me know, right? So the next thing I want to show you is more complex, what is called Boolean operators. So let's say you're interested in Aliyeva, so the female members, I guess, of the Aliyev family. And you're interested in people either called Arzu or, oh God, typing this while talking. So just to be clear about what this is supposed to do, you're trying to look for documents that mention the term Aliyev, and they also mention either the term Arzu or the term Meriban or the term Lela. What's nice about this is it will rank things. So you will find things that mention Arzu and Meriban and Lela on top, and then things that I mentioned only one of them will go further down towards the bottom. Let me just run this quickly so you can see. So now you can see I'm finding a lot of mentions of Meriban, Aliyeva, but you also find these documents here that are mentioning both Meriban and Arzu and Lela. And I've misspelled Lela. I'm looking obviously for a fact check and not a first daughter. So I see that there's a question here from Militia. about the fuzzy queries, the Vladimir thing. So let me just clarify that once more. So the question is basically about spell checking. So let's say I'm looking for the aliefs, but I'm coming from a German context, right? So in Germany, we would call them the aliefs. And so if I type in alief, you will see that there's no result about alief, because that's not how any kind of serious company registry would spell their name. But if I say, okay, allow for 2 spelling mistakes in that word, which is this one here, by the way, is a tilde. It's a little curly thing. It's not a minus, it's a tilde. Let me move in even further, even though this is now getting weird, so you can see the symbol specifically. If I type this in, then it will basically look for things that look vaguely like the term alief. And now I'm back to finding the results that I wanted. This is really useful when it comes to names that are transliterated, names that originally occurred in a different alphabet, whether it's Georgian, the kind of Turkish alphabet, Armenian, or Russian, and then have been taken into Latin. So obviously you can always type in here in like whatever local language you want to. You can type in any alphabet you want to. But one functionality you should be aware of is that all the text that gets put into Aleph gets translated to Latin. That doesn't mean that the words themselves get translated, but it gets transformed into the closest Latin equivalent. And so that means that if you're looking for a Russian name, you can kind of both type in the Russian version of the Russian name, and you can type in the Latin version of the Russian name, and you would still find results. But because this process of transliteration, of translating it from one alphabet to the other, is not perfect, you might end up with less than perfect results. Let me just for a second check out the question section here, whether I've gotten everything. Yes, I think so. Okay. So I've shown these different types. The first thing, just to recall, Vladimir Putin, the literal one, where basically only the exact text Vladimir Putin will be shown. The second one, which was the Vladimir with a spell checker, so the little tilde. And also the option of proximity searches, Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to allow for 2 words between them. So Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin would also show up in these searches. And finally, the ability to say I want everything that's about Putin, but that does not mention Azerbaijan in any way. So I'm saying minus here to say don't put in Azerbaijan, right? And so now you can see that we're getting results from OCCRP's own reporting, from Kollektiv here in Germany, from WikiLeaks, etc., but no more Azeri reporting. And finally, also the ability to say Putin or, oh God, Putin or Yeltsin. Again, I think I might have the German spelling here. So you can also do these OR queries. So that's kind of the basic things that I wanted to just show to you quickly. Just one further thing that I think is quite useful sometimes in your investigations. Let's say I'm going back to this company I was interested in, Tullow Oil, and oh wait, sorry, I'm just seeing that Jody has asked a question, so I'm going to quickly answer that. What does the tilde1 and tilde2 actually mean? And yes, it means that there can be either 1 or 2 differences in the result. So if I'm going for Tullow, which probably doesn't exist, and I'm putting in on, actually, if I'm going for Tullow like this, then I have 2 spelling mistakes against the oil company. So if I do 1, it still won't find the oil company. And if I'm doing 2, now it finds the oil company. But obviously, as you can see, now we're also matching completely different things like Kulov. So that's why this is a bit of a precarious sport. But let me just go back to this. So one thing I wanted to point out as a function that's quite useful if you're doing like an in-depth investigation is to have the download option here. So to be clear, you're not actually downloading all these documents. What you're doing is you're downloading a list of the results. So I'm just going to open this up here. And what I'm getting is an Excel spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet, let me make it a bit bigger, contains all the results from my search. Why is this a good idea? Because sometimes you might find quite a lot of interesting material and you want to take your time going through it, right? So what you might want to do is, instead of just clicking on everything on the website after each other, you might want to add a little comments column here, and you might want to kind of start making notes. For example, what I like to do is I like to mark them up in a color. So for example, I'm going to mark this one yellow because it's really interesting. I'm going to mark this one here as yellow because it's really interesting. Smar is telling me that the video is gone. I can't confirm that here. I'm just gonna hope for a second that that this works, and to take the meantime to clear out the questions that I think we've gone through. Okay, it's back. Fantastic. So just to finish my point here, this is kind of providing you with a way of very easily kind of just having this list that you can go through offline, work through, make your comments, make notes, etc., etc. And I found that quite useful with people in previous investigations. This is just kind of the overview of the basic search screen. We've talked about how you can get to a specific result page, how you can get to page 3 where it's actually mentioned as opposed to the first page of the document. We've talked about how you can do advanced query operations where you can do unclear searches with a bit of ambiguity in them, how you can remove things from your searches, things like that. I want to go back into a document. Let me find a nice and long one, maybe this one here. And just kind of show this to you again. You've got the document itself here. You can go down the different pages here. And you can go to the text view here. But what I also wanted to show you is the ability to search within documents. So for example, this one here is already has the search that I ran on all the documents, tallow oil. But I could also look, for example, for another term that might be in this document, for example, the term embassy. And then I would see, okay, embassy is mentioned only on page 1. So this allows you, if you have a very long document, I mean, often you have these documents that have 700, 5,000 pages, some kind of inquiry report or something like that. And you would end up with extremely long documents. So this allows you to kind of slice through them fairly quickly. And obviously, you've always got the option to just download the document and deal with it in your local text viewer. I just want to very quickly show that this also works for tabular data. So some of the data that is in the search engine isn't actually in documents, but it's in tables. And those look a bit different. So instead of having the PDF view here, what you get is you get an overview of the different columns of that table. And what's nice again, you can search through that table. And often these tables can be as long as you want to be. I think this one here is about 200,000 rows, so you could still open it in Excel. But we've got another one, for example, that contains every voter in Azerbaijan, or we've got other ones that contain all the pending court cases in the Baku Court of Appeal. And for those ones, you just couldn't open them in Excel anymore, but this gives you a way of really easily searching through them. So for example, I might be interested in Russian property that is held by UK, in UK property that is held by companies from Russia. So you can see, again, there's a couple of companies named here, and you can see where they're incorporated. Some are in Russia, others are in Delaware, whatever. Obviously, you can also do this for more well-weathered countries. Panama, my favorite. You get all the properties in Panama. And down here you can kind of see how many results you've got. Let me just for fun show you this other example very quickly. This is the Baku Appeals Court. And this is a spreadsheet of 2 million rows, if I'm not mistaken. So it's virtually impossible to kind of use this on Excel or something like that. But what you can do, obviously, is you can always go in here and type in type in the type in some person you're interested in, and get all the court cases that mention Ilham Aliyev in the description. So this is 2,600 for the gentleman, and if you were to, for example, look for his wife, you would still get 680 cases that in some way or shape mention Meriban Alieva. Obviously, that doesn't mean that that it's the same person that is the first lady. You would have to do some real research, fact-checking, and you could do that, for example, by following up the source URL back here, which leads you to the specific page where we got this data. So that's kind of just doing intra-document search. So you can search both across all the documents through like the big search, but you can then also search within specific documents and look for matches within those documents. And again, most of the operators that I mentioned before will work there too. The final thing that I want to show you about searching these primitive searches is that you will always have facets. I've just searched for nothing right now. I could search, for example, again for my little study partner here in tallow oil. Now you can see I've searched for tallow oil. You've got the main results here, but here on the side you've got something else. You've got this panel here called document sources, and what you can see here is that we found documents from 6 different sources. So you can see that there's 45 documents matching from the WikiLeaks state cables. You've got 19 from a leak of the Azeri State Intelligence Service from 2013. You've got 8 from a database called OpenOil. You've got 7 from the Azeri Press Agency, etc., etc. So this is obviously also a way of filtering the data. So for example, if I'm only interested in what's happening in Guernsey, I might click here, and now you can see that only those 2 results are shown that really come from the Guernsey Companies Registry. So this is the document sources facet, and it's always visible because it's a really good overview. But there are also other facets. So if you click on Explore By up here, you can explore by different facets of the metadata. I think I just got a question, so let me just check that because I might have lost people. No, I think we're good. So one of the obvious things to facet by is, for example, the country that this relates to. So you can see that the 2 entries that I filtered down to relate to Guernsey. If I disable this filter, then you can see, okay, there's 45 entry that relate to the United States. That's probably the WikiLeaks cables. 26 that relate to Azerbaijan, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man. So this allows you to kind of now drill down and say, I want only the ones that are specific to Azerbaijan and not to any other countries. Similarly, you can do the same thing for languages. And you can get English documents, etc. I have to be honest that there was a mistake in the language recognition software that we're using, which I've only fixed very recently. So for the next month or so, we're still going to see some very weird matches here, like Faroese, which is probably just a mistake. But other things that might be interesting is the document author. This is often something that people leave accidentally in Word documents, right? So someone uploads a Word document and they don't realize that a Word will kind of accident or automatically put their name in this document. So you can kind of see for these specific documents, we don't have any author. If I go more generally, you can see that there's a lot of different authors that are in here. Here is Boletín Oficial de Estado, so some gazettes have set this as their author, but you can also see all the other people that kind of show up as authors. Yeah, I don't even know who Michael Dobbs is, but he seems to be very prominent in our database. So what I'm trying to show you is just that these facets are a really good way of kind of constraining the set of results that you're looking at. And it's very worthwhile to kind of go through here and filter by them a bit. One other thing that might be quite useful is file extension. So this lets you filter by what type of thing you want to see. For example, if you're only interested in PDF files, you could click here. Or if you're only interested in Excel sheets, you would click here and you would now see only Excel sheets. Again, please ask any questions that you feel might be interesting. This is essentially all I wanted to show about the basic usage of the search. The next thing I wanted to demonstrate to you was the alerting system. So sending alerts, setting alerts, and receiving updates. In order to use the alerts, what you need to do is you need to sign in, because I need to know your email address in order to send you an email. The signing process basically goes via Investigative Dashboard. So if you're logged into Investigative Dashboard, which I am, you will just in a second see that it's completely painless. If you're not logged into Investigative Dashboard, you will essentially see the ID login screen. You will sign in using your existing account and then be able to do searches under your own identity in this tool as well. So I'm going to click sign in here. And the page just reloads, and now I'm signed in as myself. You can kind of see those settings here. You can also set a different email address from what you have in ID if you want to. You're now kind of registered with the search tool. One thing you might have noticed is that before I was logged in, there was 2.3 million results in the total database. Now there's 2.4. So there's a good number of documents that are kind of held confidentially and that only show up once you're logged in. Let me just show you this because it's quite interesting in terms of adding your own data sets. You can always, if you're logged in and if you are the administrator for a data set, you can see, okay, this is the data source, and you can set very exactly who gets access to this data set. So that's a nice way of making sure that only the right people see the information. Jody just posed a question saying whether we want to add the Panama Papers when they're released. And obviously that would be fantastic. I think they would really be the right type of material to go in there. But obviously that's dependent on ICIJ making the decision to share those more widely. Now that I've signed in, you will also notice, and this is going back to kind of talking about alerts, you will also notice that I have this alerts button up here. If I click on this, I can see my existing alerts. But how do I make a new one? A new one, and I'm going to go again with my friend at Tallow Oil. When I type in a search, or when I do any type of search, I can always press set alert here. And this is really painless. Basically, there's very few reasons why after running a search, you wouldn't press that button. And now you can see that in my search, in my results set, it says here, all the results matching tallow oil. I can also get rid of this by pressing the little trash icon here. So now it's gone again. You can see that the little green thing disappeared. So I can set this alert again. So now what will happen is that every time we import new data into this tool, and this new data matches the search term that you've given, you will receive a little email. Let me just show you what that looks like. You will see something roughly along the lines of this. So this is what one of these notifications looks like. By the way, you might have seen just now, I'm going to send around these slides after the call. They also contain more detailed explanations of the search operators, which I indicated before. Now that you know how to set alerts, there's just one final thing that I want to kind of quickly walk you through, and that's the cross-referencing feature, which we're only just now developing and which is still very much in testing. And I'm very keen to hear how people think we should do this. So on the homepage, you might have noticed that I've only ever pointed to these things, which are document sources. But over here, you will also find watch lists. And these watch lists are lists of people that we are interested in for one reason or another. So for example, here is a list of things that of people and companies that have come up in the context of our Azerbaijan investigations. And if I just click on this, you'll be taken back to the search results view. So you see documents here like before, but what you also see now is you see this persons and companies thing is filled up. And you can see Ilham Aliyev occurs in 36,000 documents here. Mary Ban occurs in 29,000 documents, etc., etc. This goes on for quite a while. I'll only ever show you the 100 most common entities for a particular search at the moment. So this is kind of nice. I can now kind of go in here and click on Ilham Aliyev, for example. And now I will only see documents which mention Ilham Aliyev, right? So you can see that 36,000 documents are here, and all of these are going to mention Mr. Aliyev. You can also see where these documents come from. So by far the most in this context come from the Azeri Press Agency. WikiLeaks obviously has many. And then we also have OCCRP reporting, RISE reporting, and we've got some other sources that mention Aliyev. So this is kind of neat in itself. What's extra cool is when you can start combining data like this. So if I click on this little wheel up here, which is unfortunately a bit hidden, what will happen is I get this pop-up. And this pop-up allows me to select the watch lists which I want to have active at a given time. So for example, I can select the Interpol watch list, and I can select the Swiss watch list. The Swiss have the cleanest watch list in the universe. And I can just press OK here. And all of a sudden, I will see a few more results here. So for example, Bashar al-Assad has shown up now, and he wasn't considered previously. I will also get other entities, like for example, Rosneft, which appears on the Swiss sanctions list. You can see this little pop-up here telling me that. So now I can drill down and I can kind of start doing these more systematic searches. And what this is good for is for serendipity, right? So you might expect to find documents that mention Ilham Aliyev, but you might not expect him to show up in the same document that also mentions this company or this person or this other actor. Obviously, with heads of state, you would expect them to show up with pretty much anything. But if you're looking into a more specific thing, like a wanted criminal or like a smaller political actor, then these can be really nice in terms of letting you find linkages that are serendipitous and interesting. This is kind of showing now all documents that mention both Ilham Aliyev and Rosneft. So this is quite nice for drilling down. I want to warn you of one thing, which is basically there are lists in here that have overly broad search terms. So the Americans, at some point, the US Treasury has decided to sanction the name Maria, and I think also the name Peter, and also the words success, justice, and happiness. And these are data errors, and we need to kind of find a process for ironing them out. But that's one of the reasons why some of these watch lists aren't as useful. Finally, if you want to get rid of this, you can again go back into this dialog, say clear all, OK, and there's no more watch lists being shown, except for Ilham, because he's my active filter. All right. So that was kind of the watch list thing. The question you might ask now is, how do I add my own watch list? How do I add my own entities to this? And right now, the answer to that is slightly awkward, which is there's a second tool called search.occrp.org. And if you want to create your own your own watch list, you will go here. You will do the same sign-in that you would have to do with the search tool as well. And you can then create a new collection of entities. So I'm going to say this is the webinar demo collection. And I can then start adding a few people. So obviously, the suspects in the room should go first. I will add Ms. Jody McPhillips. And maybe I can also see Mr. Drew Sullivan being present in this. He's already a suspect. So you can see that it's quite easy to add entities into this. Unfortunately, these won't show up immediately yet on this page, but maybe after 1 or 2 nights, because we need to process this. But in the future, what we're trying to do is to make this much more immediate, this link, and to make it really easy to just say, hey, I'm interested in these 15 people, right, on this website, and then they will show up as your personal watch list in the future. Okay, so this is basically an overview of what I wanted to show you with regards to the search tool. Let me just go back here and say that all your data belong to us. So, I mean, this thing is intended as a day-to-day tool, in 2 meanings. One, as a third Layla, basically as a research mechanism for the investigative dashboard, as something where you can just go type in a random name and have a relatively good chance at this point of finding something interesting on them. but also as a day-to-day tool in the sense that we are hoping to use this in the context of investigations. If you give us a massive dump of data, you have a pretty good chance that we'll be able to make it searchable and make it more accessible for you very quickly. So what we're looking for, obviously, are kind of journalistically relevant pieces of data that you want to have indexed and that you want to have in there. So leaks that you receive, source documents that you receive, and that might be in image PDFs and stuff like that. That's really nasty to search through otherwise. So we can help you with that. And then also we're looking obviously for kind of these background data sets that are kind of useful as a reference. So country gazettes and announcement letters, company databases, property databases, procurement databases. Blacklists are a particular favorite of mine. So basically lists where countries say, these are companies we don't want to do business with anymore. Court documents obviously are really interesting. So if you find any of these, please send them to tech@occrp.org. And of course, we can keep secrets, so this stuff won't kind of get into the general public search engine without you actually telling us so. So you don't need to wait until the investigation is over. You can send it to us and we'll make it searchable for you. And this way, help you hopefully be doing a more thorough and a more comprehensive kind of investigation. So I'm looking through the questions here. I see that I'm being accused of an anti-Irish bias, which I'm not sure how I deserve that, but okay. What else do we have in terms of questions? Please feel free to make any comments or questions that you you feel might be useful for the group to have answered. I'm not seeing any questions right now. So in the interest of not making this too long either, I would just say, yeah, do get in touch with us. Please work with us on this. Give us feedback on how it works. Tell us when it's broken. Tell us when it's actually working. It's really interesting for us also to know how people use this on a day-to-day basis. So please just send us an email if you're using it, about your experience of doing so. And I really am excited about kind of seeing whether we can make this into a kind of first stop for research. So I don't think I see any questions coming in right now. In that case, I want to thank you for your time and for hanging out with me on Investigate Dashboard Search. And I hope that you have some fun with it and that you find some interesting people in there and then write some interesting stories about them. Thank you.